Stick Your Neck Out, the weekly podcast of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation.
Dear listeners, welcome. In today's podcast, I'm presenting to you a blog entry I wrote for the Cantari blog a few weeks back. Today's podcast is all about this, the podcast to restore your faith in humanity. You might think that speaking about your own podcast is easy. Well, no, it isn't. At least not for me. When I came up with the slogan for the podcast Stick Your Neck Out, the podcast of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation, I was looking for something catchy that sounded good, that described the initial idea of this podcast. Today, with more than 40 episodes published and many more in production, I am convinced that the slogan is an unbeatable description. The podcast to restore your faith in humanity does exactly that. I've interviewed Giraffe Heroes, Cantari alumni and friends of giraffes. Every single one of them has remarkable stories. In fact, some of you, dear listeners, described getting goosebumps when listening to these stories and reflecting on my guests' lives and work. Well, you know what? Me too. One thing I know for sure, talking to these people, researching about them, getting to know them in this very personal way has made me restore my faith in humanity. And I really hope these inspiring talks can restore the faith in humanity by the ones who listen to it too. Helping hands, altruism, and kindness are all around. Let me tell you our story, the story of this podcast. The Giraffe Heroes project is turning 40 this year. Its mission is to commend and support personalities sticking their necks out and fighting for the social issues that matter. Justice, freedom, our environment, and much more. For 3 years, the Giraffe Heroes Foundation, devoted to European giraffes who stick their necks out for the common good, has been active from Basel. I approached the Giraffe Heroes Foundation founder with the idea of having a podcast, another storytelling platform to share the stories of those astonishing people called Giraffe Heroes. The stories also of complex and extensive issues, the stories of individuals whose lives exemplify those problems. And so it began. At first, there were only giraffes. But while listening to our episode with Giraffe Heroes Abriye Tembeken, which I totally recommend, the Giraffe Heroes Foundation founder realized that the Cantaris are doing something in a principal way similar to what he and his team at the foundation aim at doing. He wrote, and I quote, "You went into it from the root. You get the giraffe before they even have properly awoken to themselves, and then help them to become what it is hidden inside them. And this, of course, they will always remember and thus keep a relation and interaction with the source from where they have started out on their mature journey." So we went from telling only the stories of the Giraffe Heroes to also portraying Cantari alumni. In what they are doing, the Cantaris are the perfect example of and perfect match for the Giraffe Heroes project itself. Reads a blog entry at Stay in the Course, the blog of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation, and so it is, indeed. Cantaris are strong people who have overcome adversity and are equipped with the tools necessary to run their own organizations for social changes. The goal is to achieve social change from within. Thus, it is obvious that the aim is to create an impact in their own communities. Rather than helping, it is an exchange of experiences and skills, a fruitful program with a win-win situation for everyone who is participating. Listening to the podcast is part of participating as well, of course. To get active afterwards, to get out of everyone's comfort zone, it is a choice everyone has to make in their own. Regardless of the circumstance in which they find themselves in the course of their lives, these giraffes, Cantaris, and friends of the giraffes are playing a part, a big one, in spreading positivity and making our world overcome its challenges. And I tell you what, having created this platform, this podcast, reminds me of why I became a journalist in the first place. I wanted to drive belief and behavior change. Listening to these stories, talking to these people is a confirmation that this podcast can't have a different slogan. But not everything is sweets and candies. It can be challenging doing a podcast. To produce an interview podcast like this one, you need at least, of course, 2 persons. Two persons sitting in different parts of the world, having different problems and different possibilities. You know that some of the programs you have to work with interviewing from a distance are not super accessible? Many of the people trying to make this world a better place are people with disabilities. Or, I have to say this according to how the established privileged norm will describe it. Most of my guests are people living in developing countries. Sometimes they have no electricity, insufficient internet, or really old equipment. Not all of them have a microphone, less an audio interface to guarantee a good sound quality. But for many of them, this is not a priority. Luckily, having grown up in Cuba, these problems are very familiar to me. I know that there are more urgent problems than recording a podcast to widen your reach. That time doesn't always seem so valuable. That mentality differs. I am conscious of how privileged the situation I find myself in right now is. Yet, I sometimes wish I could really do the recording sitting in the same room, or at least having a really good connection to be able to transmit what it actually needs to have a really good audio, and what benefit that gives us. Anyway, knowing, researching, and talking to people in this podcast was, and it still is, a real positive experience. You know, especially during times where the corona pandemic has taken over media and also made distances worldwide noticeably real again. Through the talks, though, I could get a real close impression on what all these social change makers are up to. And I have to say, I'm really happy every Tuesday to make more people know about these truly important, truly honest, and real social changes they are creating. In my head, I already have a map where to go as soon as possible and how to produce more detailed, more visional portraits of all individuals. Creating valuable information about these projects, about their projects, making people know about those hands-on activists for social change who don't fear to take on change. It got an inspiration and impact to the extent that it really makes me want to go to be part of Cantari, visit the campus, and get in touch directly with Sabrille, with Paul, the team, and the current round of Cantaris. You know, accompany them and also be able from the very first beginning to be part of exchanging experience and information on what to put in the backpack regarding knowledge and tools on how to handle media, how to handle homepage, online presence, conducting interviews. I mean, let my experiences from the last month be part of advising some of the obstacles that were recurring but are easy to take care of. Meanwhile, I'm going on producing this podcast, curious on what comes next, hopeful to be able to overcome technical hurdles and physical distance, and finger crossed that I'll make it to Kerala on time to dive into the social change spirit personally. Sharing this space with the Giraffe Heroes, with the friends of the giraffes, and with the Cantaris, it has been a roller coaster of feelings. Every episode comes with more than increasing my optimism. I've had guests that have motivated me to do good. Others have encouraged me to cope with my own. Some remind me to be the change I wish to see. Many of them, the existence of resilience, and that this is something you can also learn. I've been able to look deeper on other emotions and motivations, to understand, to listen, to hope, to give back, to heal. Listen to this podcast and your faith in humanity will be restored. And there we are at the end of the podcast to restore your faith in humanity. You'll find the stories of the Cantari alumni and the Giraffe Heroes, the stories of people sticking their necks out every Tuesday in Spotify, iTunes, our homepage, and every other place where you get your podcast. And if you subscribe, you don't have to look out for us. We'll be coming to you. Dear listeners, if there is a friend, a family member, an organization, or someone you know who is doing a great work in the community, someone sticking the neck out, just nominate them as a giraffe hero or tell us about them. Come and visit us at giraffe-heroes.eu. My name is Jean-Pierre Aguiar Durañona, and I hope you join us also on our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. But more importantly, I hope you join us again next week.
Stick Your Neck Out, the weekly podcast of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation.